Welcome back into Ramon, Kayla, and Will on this Friday morning. Kayla Anderson, Ramon Foster with you guys. And joining us on the hotline, it is Kevin Clark of ESPN. Also has a show called This is Football for Omaha Productions. How are you, Kevin?
What's going on? I'm glad to be here.
Glad to have you here, man. It has been wild for the last 2 days as we are starting to see this Titans staff come together under new head coach Brian Callahan. And that's where I'll start with you, Kevin. You know him well in terms of his work. What do you expect out of a guy like Brian Callahan as a head coach now here in Tennessee?
He does the number one thing that is required of a head coach in 2024, which is he supports the quarterback. He's done it with Peyton Manning, which was an easy job, Stafford, which is a medium job, and then Joe Burrow, bringing him from a rookie to what he is now. He gives those guys the platforms they need. I spent a long time with him talking about the different adjustments that he's had to make with Burrow. Obviously, Burrow does so much of it because he's basically a supercomputer. But Brian Callahan was there to help, and I think that if you're going to maximize the quarterback position, whether that's Levis or somebody else down the road, you want a guy like Brian Callahan. So I think it's a great hire. I think that there probably was some trepidation because he wasn't the play caller in Cincinnati. In my opinion, that doesn't matter. They got a good one.
And it looks like he will have a new offensive coordinator who he goes way back to with his days at De La Salle in Concord, where they won championships together there at their high school. And now it looks like Nick Holes will be the offensive coordinator here. How do you see that relationship working out in terms of, obviously Brian Callahan is going to be the play caller, but needs someone he can trust, right, to communicate and execute that?
Yeah, well regarded throughout the league. I think that everybody's role is so different when you're not the play caller. What does the OC do? Well, I mean, listen, that was what Brian Callahan was doing in Cincinnati, and it's a lot of support stuff. It's a lot of, hey, making these adjustments, meeting with the quarterback throughout the week. I think he's doing all the right things as far as building that staff, bringing in someone he knows and trusts. That can only help. I mean, I think you have to have a mix, guys, of guys you know really well who you know will be in the foxhole with you, and guys you don't know, because I think there's a lot of cronyism and just hiring your buddies and stuff throughout the staff, and so you need a mixture of that. Guys you do know, guys you don't know, and I think that getting that balance right is one of the biggest challenges in modern football. But it seems like Brian Callahan's going about it the right way.
Kevin Clark is joining us this morning to discuss Brian Callahan and some of these Titans hires here. Kevin, thanks for joining us, man. Really do appreciate it. With that being said, are we seeing a trend that, was started by Zach Taylor and Brian Callahan in Cincinnati, to where an offensive guy hired to be your head coach calls the plays, and it seems like the template is to hire somebody to pretty much assist and set them up to be successful on game day? Because the pro tip is Andy Reid is doing the exact same thing with Matt Nagy in Kansas City.
Yeah, 100%. And it was funny because I think the preparation is so key, and you know this obviously, because the thing that Brian Callahan was so good at is, and this is the last time we spoke about football was in August of last year in Cincinnati, in that stadium, and we were talking about the adjustments Joe Burrow had to make against cover two, which is obviously the dominant defense, or two high looks is the dominant defensive look that an elite quarterback is going to get in this era of football. And he was saying basically teams change their identity because of Joe Burrow and how good he is. And so they have to have 4 or 5 game plans going into a week, because the Ravens might change their identity for Joe Burrow, or the Browns might change their identity for Joe Burrow just to defend a certain pass. And so they needed to have, okay, hey, we need a Tampa 2 playbook this week. We need a one high playbook this week. Or they're using this new front we haven't seen because they're trying to get Joe Burrow out of his rhythm. And Brian Callahan's job was to have all of those different plans and backup plans. It was a free-flowing thing. And if you don't have a play caller and a guy who's going to be able to help you, whether that's a quarterback's coach, whether that's an OC who doesn't call plays, you're going to be lost. Andy Reid, as you just said, cannot do this all by himself. We've seen that time and time again. He needs a offensive coordinator who knows the system, knows exactly what he's doing, whether that's Matt Nagy, whether that's Eric Bieniemy, whether that's Doug Peterson before him. And that's the setup. If you have a play caller head coach, the setup is you better have an OC who's going to help as much as possible with the quarterback position.
When you also look, it's been reported by Mary Kay Cabot that his father, I only want to say it, is almost like nepotism or something in the reverse way, right?
Nepotism.
In the reverse way, though, but the first time head coach hiring a father to be his coach. Can you give us more insight, if you have, on that dynamic of those two guys and what his father somewhat done in this league and what that can mean for a Tennessee Titans team that was bad in protecting Will Levis, Ryan Tannehill, and others here in Nashville?
I mean, I've seen people say, and I've heard people say, that Bill Callahan is the best position coach in football on that offensive line. And I don't know anything to disprove that. This is a massive hire. It's funny because when I saw this, and I don't know if I can say this on the radio in Tennessee, when I saw this, initially they said it was the first time an NFL coach has hired their father. And I actually misremembered and thought that Lane Kiffin had hired his father, Monty, with the Raiders. But it wasn't. It was in 2009 with the Tennessee Volunteers. But I'm not going to mention Lane Kiffin's Tennessee tenure here. It was kind of like that, where it's like you're the son of a legendary guy, and then you bring him in. Obviously, you mentioned with Nick Holtz, like obviously a guy you can trust in your father, a guy who knows the game, a guy who can help you, who's been a head coach. That Bill Callahan did not have a successful head coaching tenure with the Raiders, 20 years ago, but he still knows how things are done. He's worked for a lot of great coaches, so that can only help. And so I think that this is massive. And he had said in the past to Bengals beat writers that if he ever was a head coach, he'd want to coach with his father. And you're right, it is some sort of weird reverse nepotism. I think it's kind of funny. And what do you do? What do you do if your dad screws up? Do you call him into the office and say, "Hey man, do you rip him a new one?" It's a very funny dynamic. But the good news is that Bill Callahan is very good at his job, so you won't have to worry about that.
Kevin, man, you've talked to a lot of players of different positions, and you hear conversations about coaches and, what they like about their team and dislike about their team. I've been trying to keep myself calm because the staff that they're getting here in Nashville, if you're a player, you know these names and you understand what they're capable of doing. If you're starting with Brian Callahan and then his father, and, of course, they have Tyke Tolbert as a coach that's in the fold too, from the player's perspective, they understand what's good and what's bad when it comes down to how coaches and teams are built, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, all that matters is the players. It doesn't matter how we view it or what Bill Callahan's reputation is around the league or what Tyke Tolbert's reputation around the league is that the players are going to buy in or not very early on. And so I think that's always the biggest thing. That's also why you get a group of authentic guys, is because players can smell a fraud a mile away. And you certainly know, I'm sure you've been around.
You doggone right.
Where you don't want to buy in. And I think that the most important thing is getting guys who've been around the league, who players like, and I think that especially with the team that's in transition, I mean, it's going to be a lot of younger players. There's going to be a lot of roster turnover. It's going to be about teaching, and it's going to be about getting through to these guys. And so I think it looks like Brian Callahan is building a staff with that in mind.
So that's funny you say that. As players, we had a coach on our roster. I will not say what year, what time, what position, or anything, okay? But let's just say this. The conversation was, man, there's a village idiot, okay? so we know when it's good and when it's bad, Kevin.
Right, exactly. And no amount of media cover can help you if you're the coach who's not working hard, or the coach who's not putting guys in position to succeed, or not teaching guys what they need to know for a given week. Like, that's the thing, is we can talk about this all day, but what matters is when rookie minicamps start, when mandatory minicamps start in June, that these guys get through to those players. And so it's always funny when I hear media people saying, "Oh, this guy's a home run hire," like the home run hire gets determined by the players in 5 months.
Kevin Clark of ESPN, so kind to join us this morning on RK Dub. So, Kevin, when it comes to just Callahan's extensive resume working with quarterbacks, I think it's so important to note just the types of quarterbacks he's worked with along the path, because they're all different, right? But it seems like everywhere he's been able to get a lot out of them. What has gone into that in terms of being able to make these guys successful? Is it just him listening? Is it the way that he connects with them? What have you seen?
Well, I think it's going to be hard for him to take much credit for Peyton Manning. But he can try. The thing about the conversations that I've had over for the past 4 years, I want to say in Cincinnati, are he empowers the quarterbacks. And that flows from Peyton Manning because he saw the ownership that Peyton Manning had over that offense. And obviously, you're not going to be able to do that with a second-year guy or a guy who's not necessarily proven, but you could do that with Peyton Manning, Matthew Stafford, and then eventually Joe Burrow, is get them into quote-unquote Peyton Manning mode, which is the term he used. And it's really about letting the quarterback have a say in everything. And that's what good coaches tend to do, is they say, hey, what are you comfortable with? And then we have these concepts and we'll blend them together. What did Joe Burrow run at LSU? Let's all blend this together. I mean, you think about somebody like Will Levis, like there were concepts at Kentucky that he thrived on. Maybe you get, you have a meeting and you say, hey, let's take this from Liam Cohen's offense or whatever, and let's just kind of blend this whole thing together. And so I think it's more about being player-led and quarterback-led. Those are the best coaches in this era, are the coaches who take what the player's comfortable with and blends it with their style. I think that the old way, and the reason so many quarterbacks or players have failed over the past 15 years is the coach said, hey, I want you to do this. That may not be what the player is good at or comfortable with. Bill Belichick famously, he used to say, don't tell me what a player can't do in scouting, tell me what he can do, and then we'll figure that out. And I think that when you coach from that perspective, good things are going to happen. And it seems like Brian Callahan's got that vision where he says, we want the quarterback to have so much input that he is comfortable with everything that we do. And I think that when you see the quarterbacks he's had a chance to coach, you see a lot of that reflected in it, where it's like, okay, Stafford's going to have success here because they're going to do the stuff that he wants to do and build a support structure around him. Peyton Manning, obviously, Burrow. So that's the biggest thing for me is, sitting down with Will Levis saying, hey, what do you want to cook with, and then building an offense from there.
I think the other thing people are excited about here, just with a fresh look and really focusing for once on the offense, because it's been a little bit of a lack of focus here, and really in terms of the wide receivers too. And I know they've had some studs over there in Cincinnati. They just have hired, it looks like, Tyke Tolbert as a new wide receivers coach here to work with Brian Callahan. But how much can Callahan's experience just kind of getting a lot out of those receivers there in Cincinnati to be for here in Tennessee, where you've got a guy like Treylon Burks who just hasn't developed yet?
Yeah, again, going back to the Peyton Manning thing, it'd be great if there was a T. Higgins or a Jamar Chase on this roster. That has not yet shown itself. But the one thing about those guys is the free-flowing chemistry that they all had and the ability for them to play basketball on grass. And the one thing I've always said about Burrow is, and that offense, is that if you have a franchise-changing guy or guys, because I really do think there's 3 or 4 guys on that Bengals offense who are franchise changers, you have to have the humility and the capability to let them change the franchise. Kind of what I was talking about earlier, but like they let those guys do what they do best. And for me, with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, so many of those plays are either on the fly, improvised. There's such a chemistry that it gets baked into everything that they do. It's really special. And it's not just, I think sometimes, and I've had people say this to me in Cincinnati, sometimes I think that the Cincinnati people think that in 5 years, we're going to look back on this and say, obviously Burrow's great, but I can't believe Tyler Boyd, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins run one roster. And I think they've built an offense, and unfortunately Burrow got hurt, so we didn't get to see it last year. They built an offense where there's so many weapons and there's so much development. A guy like Treylon Burks, a big physical guy, there's going to be a role for him. There's going to be, with Will Levis, probably even 3, 4. They're try to build an offense where there's 3 or 4 options, get guys out into routes if he's comfortable with that, like Joe Burrow was. Burrow, with Burrow, his vision was a super Burrow, and so he's just kind of a special case. But I think that getting guys out into routes, spreading the ball around, that can only help receiver development. And I think that Callahan knows what that looks like, and I think that you'll see at least some development on the offensive side of the ball, because it's just going to be different. They're going to maximize the offense, which and I'm a huge Mike Vrabel fan. It was just a different philosophy, and I think that if fans are looking for more offense, they're going to get it.
Kevin, that's what's super unique too. Is you look at those 5 years that him and Zach Taylor, Brian Callahan and Zach Taylor been in Cincinnati. I think it's this, like as a guy that played against that group, they had a lot of good players. Andy Dalton had the NFL somewhat in the palm of his hand with the players that they had, and of course the other side of that defense. But you look at what they've done over these last 5 years, and you say to yourself, Joe Burrow's there, yeah, but they have a level of sustainability that I feel like in Cincinnati that wasn't there under the previous tenure. Is that what you somewhat think is that what you think is why Brian Callahan was so excited and admitted that he wanted this job here in Nashville?
Yeah, I mean, it's first of all, I think this Tennessee job is a really good job. New stadium, a roster that I think is a little bit of a blank slate. You can start building with it. A quarterback that you can see the vision with Levis, and there's not a lot of commitment if he's not the guy. If they want to go, if Will Levis proves to not be the guy this year, you can always next year figure out something in the draft. And so I'm not surprised that Callahan was excited about this job. Nashville is an awesome place to live. I actually just interviewed Matt Castle last week, and he lives in Nashville, and he was talking about all the ex NFL athletes who live down there. Guys want to be in Nashville. Like, guys want to live in Nashville. It's centrally located. It's warmer than a lot of places. Like, guys want to be in Nashville. It can be a real destination there. And then you mentioned the stability part of it. Yeah, I mean, the leap that Burrow took from Dalton obviously was special, but the Bengals have always been good at drafting players. There's always been a floor there. The drafting of it was not the last 10 years. The drafting of it was not the problem, or the last 15 years, because they had talent all over the place, starting with the Chad Johnson era. It was more about how the organization spent, how they approached free agency, how they approached little different things in the organization. And so it's definitely a new era in Cincinnati, and I think that you might be able to see, especially with the offensive side of the ball, a bit of that in Tennessee, where they just take an era that was successful and upgraded it.
Also, I have to ask you this: as the playoffs, the Super Bowl is next week. You've had conversation with Patrick Mahomes, man, and when you think that he's done and he got to go to Baltimore to the bank and play them right, and he just does his thing. And I know that defense played a huge part in it too for Kansas City. But as far as the quarterback goes, what is it in your conversation with Patrick Mahomes that makes him tick?
Oh my gosh, it's funny because he is such a calm, casual guy. You know, he comes from baseball. His dad was a baseball player, and there's not a lot of like rah about him. He's not Tim Tebow giving the Varsity Blues speech going into the second half of the national championship or whatever, right? He is all the sort of the motivation and the things that fuel him. They're all internal, and even his teammates. I had Mitch Schwartz on my show this week, who played with him a couple of years ago, and is still close to them. His teammates are surprised at when he's really mad about something. And you know, like we saw a couple weeks ago with the Buffalo, where he was clearly motivated by the fact that people said he couldn't win or hadn't won a road playoff game. He's not Michael Jordan, where he's just going out and trying to find motivation in anything, but when he does, he harps on it, and it helps him fuel. And I think that what's funny about Mahomes is, like, who has actually doubted Mahomes in the last 5 years? It's impossible. So you have to kind of dig a little bit and kind of understand that you're going to have to stretch the truth a little bit if you're going to say, hey, nobody believed in me. But, you know, going on the road in Baltimore, and people saying that the Ravens were a buzzy team, missing Joe Thuney, the guard, playing against a guy who's going to win the MVP and Lamar Jackson, you can find a little bit of motivation there. And I feel stupid for I picked the Ravens close because I thought the Joe Thuney injury was going to matter. Thought they were going to be able to have a different game plan in Baltimore. Thought they were going to get more internal pressure in the inside of the line. It didn't happen. And so now I feel like an idiot. And the thing I always say about Mahomes is, you know, he's in his Michael Jordan era, and that means a lot of famous people are going to be relegated to minor characters. Josh Allen Lamar Jackson in a couple weeks. It could be Kyle Shanahan again. I'm not going to pick against him until I'm proven otherwise, frankly.
And Kevin, don't feel stupid because we all picked the Ravens here by a slim margin as well. So you know what? I think he proved a lot of us wrong. Don't think just because I went on the road for the playoffs for the first time means that I'm going to lose. Yeah, excellent stuff from you today.
Absolutely.
Kevin Clark of ESPN. Give him a follow at BY Kevin Clark on the X. And we appreciate you. Have a great weekend, Kevin.
Thank you, Kev.
Thanks, guys.
Great stuff, man. The insight he brings, and great get by Ramon Foster there, connecting with Kevin Clark. The first time we've had him on this show, but I really think some important stuff that he said that kind of really paints the picture with what Brian Callahan will do here.
Yeah, for sure. And, of course, like you said, the talent wasn't an issue in Cincinnati. It was stability and balance of what they needed to have a good product on the field. Again, you should be somewhat excited. Like, just keep your powder dry.
Right.
Keep your powder dry.
You can put a little sprinkles in there,
you know. Sprinkle, yeah.
Well, we'll wrap up the show when we return. It's been a fun day here on Ramon, Kayla, and Will, and we'll send you out in style. It's Ramon, Kayla, and Will here on 104.5 The Zone.
It's Ramon Foster for Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. And check us out, y'all. It's Valentine's season, and love is in the air, okay? But guess what? You can also find